up, give it up.
All right. See, most people would wonder where that energy comes from, but if you notice, there's a Dunkin' Donuts right there. And I think it's piped right in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending a little bit of your Saturday afternoon. As Dave just said, my name is Bernie Moreno. I'm running for the United States Senate. We have 10 days to go in this primary. As I said to the reporters earlier, here's what this election comes down to. If what you want for the Republican Party is more Mitt Romneys and more Liz Cheneys, then you have two choices on the other side. You do. And we have lots of those, as Congressman Davidson will tell you. If you want somebody who's going to go down there and be a reinforcement to Congressman Davidson, to Jim Jordan, to J.D. Vance, and President Trump, then please vote for me. Please vote for me. And I want to get this out there, especially the news will love to clip this. I need all of you to vote 11 times. 11 times. Vote 11 times. What does that mean? It means you go vote. You can do it today. You can do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Pick a day. But vote, if you can, early. Just bank it. My wife and I voted a couple weeks ago. By the way, my wife's here somewhere. Oh, there she is, Bridget. Thank you for being here, Bridget. But we voted early, vote early, and if you can't vote early, make certain you vote on March 19th. So that's one vote. Then find 10 other people. Who's not here today? As you may know, there's a lot of people who don't even know there's a primary coming up, right? Get them engaged, get them to vote. We need a resounding turnout. What will happen in a low turnout election is that you can have a situation where we do end up with one of my opponents whose family owns what's the name of the baseball team in Cleveland? The Cleveland Indians. Right. Exactly, right, Cleveland Indians. Not the other name. He's spending enormous sums of money for this race. There couldn't be more contrast between the two of us. He believes that we should give illegal immigrants amnesty. Right? We've tried that. How did that work out? Right? He's somebody who increased your gas tax. Are you happy about that? Right? He's somebody that has all kinds of bills to restrict gun rights. Right? Vote against the heartbeat bill. Right? So this is a guy who's not on our side. He's not on our side. But when you spend $30 million in advertising, as President Trump would say, with ads that are not so nice, all right? Somebody's going to watch an ad and think, I'm confused who the conservative is. He's talking about going to the border and being tough on a border, but you can't be tough on a border if you're going to do amnesty. Because I use this analogy, maybe it's a little clumsy. If somebody broke into your home, you would immediately ask them to leave. You wouldn't house them, feed them, clothe them, and let them stay for weeks on time, because you'll have more people that will break into your house. And I'm a legal immigrant. I came here when I was a kid. You know what my parents told me? Learn the language. And English should be our official language.
That's right.
Learn the culture, assimilate, melting pot. Remember those words?
Yes.
Right? Well, what do we have? We have the total opposite scenario in America today. We have people here that come into this country, get a check for $2,200 a month, get a free phone, get a free change of clothes, get a free flight to anywhere you want in America, get free housing, free health care, free education. By the way, in New York City, they're giving them 3 meals a day, but they complained about the food.
Oh, God.
So instead, they gave them prepaid credit cards. Does your government give you any of those things? Of course not, because we're a country that's built on merit and hard work and self-reliance. But what they're doing is bringing people in from other countries. I'm going to turn this over to our special guest. I just want to say this. This is how broken Washington, D.C. is, especially the Senate. Last night, Senator Bill Hagerty, who's endorsed me as well in this race. We've got 15 senators that have endorsed me, including Bill Hagerty. Great guy from Tennessee. He introduced an amendment. Are you ready for this amendment? This is a way to introduce my guest today, because he's done the exact same amendment in the House. When they do the census to determine congressional districts, you only count American citizens.
Yes.
Imagine any other conversation. Because you sit there and go, wait a second, that's not the law? Oh no, they count illegals also. So by estimations, Democrats have probably an extra 20 congressional districts. So Congressman Davidson introduced that in the House. Bill Hagerty introduced that as an amendment last night in the Senate. Every Democrat voted against it.
Of course.
So if you think these are failed policies, these are not failed policies from Biden's perspective. They're doing exactly what they intended to do. They're so depraved and are so hungry for power, they will literally destroy this country getting it. If it's okay with you, with Congressman Davidson, talk about a bill that just went through, 357 pages of garbage that he voted against. Thank you, by the way, for voting. We need a round of applause for that one. So, no further ado, I'm so proud to introduce a true fighter. There's so few people in Congress that have two attributes. Number one, they're smart. Because let me tell you that. Did you see the goblins on the State of the Union address that were standing up?
Oh, gosh.
So number one, his intellect already puts him in the 1 percentile of people in Congress. And number two, he actually does the things he campaigns on. He votes the way he tells his constituents he's going to vote. That puts him in a 0.5 percentile, which is crazy because those two things should be a prerequisite for the job. But you're very lucky here in this part of Ohio to have such a great congressman. I'm incredibly honored to have his endorsement. So can we give it up and welcome Congressman Davidson?
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you for running for Senate. It's a big thing to step away from the very successful business that you've built and to commit to public service. Bridget, thank you for supporting him and doing that. And it is a big deal. You know, I remember when I was confronted, I had a much smaller business, and Jim Jordan had stopped into my office and asked who I was going to back in the race to replace John Boehner. And, you know, I said, well, you're Jim Jordan. Who are you going to back? You know, I will,
Jim Jordan.
you know, I will be happy to consider whoever you think would be the right person. And he said, you know, it'd be good if we had an Army Ranger business guy in the race. He was referring to me. And we laughed because it was crazy. And I went home and told my wife about it. And she said, well, what'd you tell him? I said, we laughed because it's crazy. She says, no, it's not. You'd be great at that. I pushed back a little bit about the crazy part of it. And she had the saying, she goes, if we don't send different people, how is it ever going to change?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we need to do. We've got plenty of people in politics that, you know, went to law school, went to local government, went to state government, and then on to DC. We've got plenty of people that go to Congress, regardless of which path they come from, to be there. Frankly, there are a lot of people that, while they go out and campaign like they want to change the status quo, you know they don't want to change the status quo because that's not how they vote. Everyone left of center wants more government. They think the solution is more government. And while Republicans mostly know to say they want a smaller, more accountable government, firstly, everybody has some version of that on their website. They know how to campaign. They never vote for it. Every Congress, we get a bigger government. If you want to restore our country, if you want to restore a republic, you have to get a government small enough to fit back in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And we can afford a government that small. And that's why I think Bernie Moreno.
See, the commercials work.
Bernie Sanders is crazy. The only solution is more government. But Bernie Moreno is the right kind of guy to send to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's right.
He's got the right kind of background, and he understands the kind of policies and principles that are really going to change the place. He's also got the courage and the conviction to go do it. If you look at the polls today, it's a competitive race. Bernie's leading, which is the way it should be.
Absolutely.
But there's some undecided people out there. And people ask me, you know, Warren, you're a conservative. People know that. Who are you supporting? I'm supporting Bernie Moreno. Bernie Moreno is the right guy to win this race. He's the right guy to win the primary. And he's the right guy to go beat Sherrod Brown.
Oh, gosh.
Nothing epitomizes status quo like Sherrod Brown. I mean, he's been in politics as long as Joe Biden's been in politics. So
He still hasn't fixed his hair.
I could live with the bad hair.
Me too.
It's the bad votes.
That's right.
And look, Elizabeth Warren isn't the chairman of Senate Banking. Sherrod Brown's the chairman of Senate Banking. Right, but Sherrod Brown does everything Elizabeth Warren tells him to do. No one made Sherrod Brown walk the communist banker around and try to get her confirmed to the Senate. Literally, PhD from communist Soviet bloc. So these are the kind of far left ideologues that Sherrod Brown and crew want to populate our government with. And frankly, if you send people that are simply willing to go there and wear a red jersey and say, I'm a Republican, those are the kind of people that are going to keep being there. You have to send people like Bernie Moreno who are going to go help change this place. I know in the House of Representatives, look, we don't have a big majority, and we only have a real majority if we all work together. It's been tough. And when it comes to cutting government, and there's a lot of people that have the words, but they don't have the deeds. That's how we're $34 trillion in debt. We're adding $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. So if you want a smaller government, at some point you have to vote for a smaller government. So we need reinforcements. We need reinforcements in the House. We know the Senate needs reinforcements. And with this race, because we're very confident in West Virginia, but with this race, when Bernie Moreno wins the primary, when Bernie Moreno beats Sherrod Brown, Republicans will control the United States Senate.
Beautiful.
Why is that important? When we get President Trump elected, because he's going to be our nominee. And I think that's the challenge. A lot of people are convinced the primary is effectively over. Why would I go vote on March 19th? You have to vote. You got to go elect Bernie Moreno. You have to vote. There are a lot of races down ballot that are incredibly important wherever you live. You got to elect not just somebody that's going to go be there, but somebody who's going to help bring the change that our country needs. And if we don't do that, even if we elect Donald Trump as president again, he's not going to have the team that's going to help him drain the swamp. He had the right saying when he took office the first term. He knew that we needed to drain the swamp, but there wasn't the kind of team support to do the work. Nothing reflects that more than our party platform. You know, historically, the platform's updated to the president's, whoever wins the presidential primary, and that becomes essentially the platform. So there's little contrasts in the primary. That didn't really happen, and you saw that in Ohio. Our governor, our former governor, John Kasich, didn't even go to the convention, and it was here in Ohio. The head of our ORP, who's now in jail, Matt Borges, wouldn't use the Ohio Republican Party to help Donald Trump win the presidential election against Hillary Clinton. So you had to set up all these Trump centers all over the state to be able to get behind our candidate in the fall. And here's the thing, when I talk about the fall, there are people that are like, well, I just don't know if I can vote for Donald Trump again. And I get, there are some people that are like, look, he's just not my style. They might like the policies, they don't like the style. I'll tell you a story about a young lady. It was her first time voting. She's like, I don't know if I can vote for Donald Trump. But I'm praying a lot about it. I said, well, look, for me, it's really easy. It's either going to be Donald Trump or it's going to be Hillary Clinton. It's a piece of cake. Not a hard choice. But it's your vote, so I hope you go vote. So she voted, and eventually I saw her again, and she came back. I said, so did you vote? And she said, yeah. I said, how'd you decide? She said, well, you know, I prayed about it a lot. I said, yeah, you told me that. And she said, so I got to the election place. I prayed some more. And then I went in and I voted for Donald Trump. And I came out and I asked for forgiveness.
That's nasty. That
If
is
that's what it takes,
nasty.
if that's what it takes, you got to do it. Because the contrast in ideas is too stark, right? And look, there are a lot of people that wish there was more granularity and room for nuance in our policy divisions. And we can have those debates. We can have those in the House. We can have those in the Senate. But it's going to be very clear at the top of the ticket. If you had any doubt, this week's State of the Union, I was there for it live and in person, and I assure you it was not better. It was a terrible speech. It was a terrible speech, and frankly, we could let him keep talking if they keep the drugs pumped in long enough for him to do it. Because he is not going to change course on his own. That should be very clear now. So I hope that that speech galvanized my colleagues so we can be united. The only way, the primary leverage that we have in the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, is the power of the purse. The Senate at least gets the extra power on confirmation. And if we can use that power, we can make him change course, even if he doesn't want to. But if we won't use that power, it's just words, it's not deeds. We have to get the deeds behind it. We have to use the power of the purse to say, yes, we'll fund a government. We're going to fund a government that secures a border. We're gonna fund a government that reins in spending. We're gonna fund a government that gets our economy back on track instead of crippling it with more free stuff for more people. The subsidies just raise the prices and they don't get to the pocketbook issues that are hurting everyone. So the person that I trust to do that out of this primary and in the fall to beat Sherrod Brown is Bernie Moreno, and I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, I want to give you a thought real quick of what's going on politically and how it affects the Ohio Senate race. So one of the things the congressman just said is, as goes Ohio, goes control of the Senate. And I can walk you through that, but let me just tell you, Sherrod Brown wins, the Democrats keep the Senate. Sherrod Brown loses, I win, Republicans have the Senate. What does that mean? If President Trump is elected, which is what I believe will happen, if the Democrats control the Senate in that scenario, just shut DC down. The American First agenda is over. There's no way to get it through. We can have a great majority in the House. They can pass all the bills in the world. They'll go to the Senate to die. There'll be nothing for the president to sign. Whatever he does with executive orders will be overruled by the court. So that scenario is a disaster. But if you think, is there a worst case scenario? Oh, there is. Biden somehow wins. And the Democrats have the Senate? Because if Biden wins, the odds of us keeping the House is almost zero. So they get all three levels of government, checkmate. We look at the young people in this room and go, America as we knew it, the America I came to, over. So the Senate, in a case where where Biden gets reelected, is the emergency brake. It's the only thing that stops us. Now, go to the opposite. What I actually think will happen, what I'm optimistic about. President Trump wins, I think we carry the House. Even though in D.C. there's a lot of conversations that won't happen, I think it will. I think President Trump will win by a landslide, actually. I think we keep the House, and then we win the Senate. Now we have all three layers of government. In that scenario, who is there really, really matters. Because if you all in this room are the 0.1% of informed political people. If everybody in Ohio knew what you knew, this is an 85-15 election. So you've been paying attention. You know that there have been forces in this country that have blocked President Trump and tried to end his presidency and next term relentlessly. I mean, what do I mean by relentlessly? Start with what Jim Jordan likes to say. They spied on his campaign. Then Russia collusion. Impeachment 1, impeachment 2, right? Raided his house. And then look at what's happened since then. 91 indictments, 91 charges, 4 indictments. They took $90 million from him yesterday. Wow. There's another $450 million. So they're taking his money, attacking his life, his person. They now have done everything to blunt this guy. And what has he done? Keeps on going. Think about the courage of that. What's more American than that? I said to Don Jr. the other day at dinner, I'll say this, share with you. I said, when I was a kid, I came to from Columbia. I used to look at what's a quintessential American. For me, it was John Wayne. I said, in essence, Trump is the new John Wayne. John said, well, don't tell like that. But it says American toughness, right? Perseverance, no quitting, right? I mean, plows through all that. Wakes up every day saying, I'm fighting for this country.
He's a patriot.
Right? It's a patriot. I mean, that idea, right? Who will do that? But now those dark forces have realized Trump's inevitable. He is our nominee, and he will win re-election. So now, all that focus is shifted to the Senate races. Because the House is too complicated for them to fight that. So because in the Senate, you fill the Senate with 2 or 3 Republicans that aren't on board with that agenda, and it's over. What is the agenda? So the question is, what are you fighting for? What are you voting for? Number 1, we're going to have a safe and secure border. You come here legally only. If you come here illegally or are here illegally, you're deported. No question, no conversation, no equivocation. If you're in the United States of America illegally, you will be deported. But that's going to require enormous courage. Because the media is going to find the one person that, oh my gosh, I can't believe they deported that guy. But you either are a country of laws or you're not. That's number 1. Number 2, energy dominance. That's not windmills on Lake Erie. It's not solar panels on prime farmland. It is coal. There's a New York Times reporter that's been following us around. I said, that's spelled C-O-A-L. So she's aware, right? It's natural gas, it's oil, it's nuclear, because we're going to be an energy-dominant country. How did Dayton, Ohio become so wealthy back in the day? Because we had abundant, affordable energy,
Yeah.
right? So that's in there. Do you remember Reagan in 1980 ran on getting rid of the Department of Education? And
Yes.
every Republican since then has said the same thing. Next year,
Never do that.
we get rid of the Department of Education.
Yes,
Do you think that happens easily?
No.
Do you think that the teachers union, which uses that as a money laundering operation, is going to say, oh, shucks, we lost the election, well, you guys go ahead and do that agenda? Oh, no. All it takes is one or two Republicans to say, oh, well, we can't, we have to have a national role. By the way, if you believe what Congressman Davidson just said, the Constitution doesn't even allow us to have it. It's not constitutional, right? So, but indeed, in this room, what I just said makes total sense.
yes.
You go to Washington, D.C. and say this, they think you're a lunatic. Are you out of your mind? Their idea is how do we grow it? 5, 10, 15, 20%. Get rid of it, their minds blow up. So the pressure that comes on somebody who's fighting for that is intense, intense. We're gonna have trade deals that benefit this country, and we're gonna stop sending money to countries that hate us.
Thank you, Bernie.
As Congressman Jordan says, I'm stealing this line from him, it's the best line I heard, they'll hate us for free. We don't have to pay them. We don't have to pay them. And by the way, the Ukraine war, are we sick of funding endless wars?
Yes.
Are we tired of funding endless wars?
Oh, yeah.
Right? We're not going to do it. We're going to create peace. And President Trump will get that conflict settled, which is what should happen. You know, my opponent I brag about being endorsed by President Trump, I'm going to be honest, I do.
I would too.
He brags about being endorsed by the left-wing editorial board of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which I think is kind of embarrassing. But in that interview, he said, listen to these words carefully, and listen to what Congressman David just said. He said in that interview, we have to stop being distracted by the dysfunction at the border to complete our obligation to Ukraine.
Who said
Matt Dolan. So let me ask you a question.
No one.
Do any of you feel an obligation to any other country other than the United States of America?
No.
But as Congressman Davidson will tell you, a lot of his colleagues, that's how they think. And I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm talking about Republicans too. That's what's got to change. We have one obligation, which is the people of this country. So this is not an election where there's 3 candidates that are basically the same. This is 2 candidates that want to take us back to the Kasich, Romney, Cheney, Bush party. That party's over, but it's still a little alive. There's a little life left there. You have to convince your friends that aren't here, that don't know. They have to vote to send a loud and clear message that this is now the America First Party, the party that actually campaigns and the things we talked about, that puts us back to our constitutional principles. I'll end with this with 2 questions. And Congress, I already told you this story. I'm in Meigs County, Ohio, 2 months ago. Meigs County is the poorest county in Ohio. And there's a guy in the audience like you are, and I'll take the questions in a second like I will with all of you. And this guy's dressed up like a working class American. And he raises his hand and he goes, I have a question for you. So we call him, what's your question? He says, what is Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution?
Go with that, Bernie.
So Matt Dillon, Frank LaRose, standing there. Remember, they've been in political office for 30 years between the 2 of them. They look at each other, they look at him, they look at each other, they shrug their shoulders in a very arrogant way, say, enlighten us.
Oh, wow.
Now I go there, get the same question. And I said, I know why you're asking, but let me answer your question first. All legislative powers shall be vested in Congress of the United States. That Congress shall consist of a House of Representatives and a Senate. But the reason you're asking isn't to quiz me. Is because you know in this country we're not following those rules.
Way to go,
We're not electing congressmen to make laws anymore. We're electing a president that has an administrative state that controls him, where they make the laws. And then we have judges making laws. And that's got to change. And that's why he cares, and that's why he was asking that question. But what's shocking to me is that 2 guys running for an office in which they're going to be in the Congress don't know the job description.
That's right.
That's nuts. But it just shows you it's not about service, it's about the job. They're term-limited politicians who are looking for their next assignment. We have to change that. We have to break that fever. This isn't what I would have thought I'd do. Like Congressman Davidson said, not what he thought he'd do. But if we stand on the sidelines, we're going to lose this country. So how many times are you going to vote?
11.
Exactly.
I'm going for 100.
By the way, I already said this publicly. The Ohio Democrat Party clipped it and said, Bernie Moreno says vote 11 times. LaRose, is this legal? I think they got jealous. They're like, wait, why are you using our playbook? All right, let's take some questions. We'll start with Dave.
So my question to you is this: we have got to work hard on eliminating this election integrity, this fraud that is constantly at every county and every state across this nation. And I've been working with 12 organizations that's actually been working on getting stuff done. There's several of them back here that been working on it as well. Because if we do not get the elections cleared up from the crap and the dead people voting, et cetera, our people that we want to get in those positions, like yourself, will never make it because of all the cheating.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I say, and I agree with President Trump. He'll say the same thing. Give us a fraud-proof margin. Give us a fraud-proof margin. You gotta go out there and vote. We can't fix the whole country from Dayton, Ohio. But in Montgomery County, make sure you're a poll worker. Make sure you go out and volunteer. Make sure you're holding the Board of Elections accountable and participate in your local county. You can't take care of the whole world. Take care of Montgomery County. Make sure you're here participating as best you can and getting people to vote. I think Ohio, we're going to be above average. Now, I'll tell you that the left fantasy is to control elections out of Washington, D.C. That's their fantasy. We would never do that. It's unconstitutional. But what we can do at a federal level is say that if you can't deliver us election results at 11:59 p.m. on election day, then maybe you shouldn't get federal funding, right? So so the states have an incentive to make sure that they have strong, fraud-proof elections. We have to recognize that our democratic republic does not survive if the people do not believe we have free and fair elections. So we will do that, Dave. I think the good news is nobody understands that better than President Trump. And we're going to have a situation where I think we'll be in much better shape, but don't take anything for granted. Because if we had sat here 4 years ago and I told you that the Chinese are going to unleash a virus that's going to cause us to illegally postpone an election, you would have said, you're out of your mind. That will never happen. But yet, here we are. What else? Yes, sir.
So what does it mean we must stand with Ukraine in consideration of the fact that we helped overthrow their government in 2014, invited them to join NATO, changed out their weapons to NATO weapons, leading to the death of over 100,000 of their citizens, total devastation of their country because we poked the bear?
Well, let me give you Matt Dolan's cell phone number. Listen, I understand. Again, the point of view is that you're given is, and again, Congressman lives this every day. You're either a Putin sympathizer or you love Ukraine. When in reality, that's not the conversation at all. The conversation is what's in America's interest. How do we end this conflict? How do we not fund another endless war? And how do we get to peace? But I can tell you this: we don't all agree on that as a Republican Party. I understand that. You may not agree with me on that, but we all agree that it's not the number one issue?
Yes.
It's not the number one issue. So even if you think, hey, we should give all kinds of money to Ukraine, let's give them billions and billions, hundreds of trillions of dollars, and you agree with that, should we take care of our border first?
Yes.
Right? Should we take care of inflation? Right? Should we take care of crime? Right? Should we have? I'll give you a number that I want you to remember. We spent $451 billion last year on housing, processing, feeding, and taking care of illegal migrants. That's a number that's kind of hard to understand because it's so big. So I'm going to put it in perspective. We have 37,000 people like Congressman Davidson that serve this country that are homeless. He's not homeless, but he served our country, so I don't connect those two. Right? He served our country. There's 37,000 veterans. Put the uniform on and serve this country that are today in America homeless. For $7 billion versus $451 billion, we could have a home for every single one of those vets. Where do you think our priority should lie? That's when we talk about what does America first mean? That's what it means. That when we're strongest abroad is when we're strongest at home. But we have people that think that our job is to take care of the rest of the world.
It's not.
And it's not. We have to take care of ourselves. Yes?
Why not campaign by saying any of the illegals who vote in the election will be the first one sent back?
Well, we're gonna send them all back, so we don't.
I
need
know
to-
that, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, they need to be the priority when they.
Well, the
if they
the
stolen.
priority of the criminals, like the guy who killed Lakem Riley, who had committed a crime in New York City against a child, and because of cashless bail was released, put on an airplane to Georgia, went there and killed a 21-year-old girl. So we have lots of places, we have sanctuary cities and sanctuary states where they're housing criminal aliens, and yet they're looking the other way. And Joe Biden, in this border bill, was gonna give them money. Was gonna give those cities money to reimburse them for for doing that. That's insane. So we're gonna get rid of every illegal in this country because we have to send that message, like I said earlier. But on the voting piece, it's a real problem. It's not only the census,
That's why they're here.
but
That's
it's
why they're
also
here.
not an accident where they end up in different congressional districts. So it's a big issue, yes.
What are your views on abortion?
Well, I'm pro-life. I'm unapologetically pro-life. I think what we should do is understand the rest of the country's not with us. So what are the things that we can do federally? What can we do federally? We can make it less expensive to have a child. It's really, I'm the one of 7. I can't even imagine what it would take today to be able to raise 7 kids. I have 4. I thought 4 was a lot. So we have to make it less expensive to have children and raise children. We have to make certain that adoption services are more available. That
Yes.
women have good access to health care. That we're funding pregnancy centers that take care of moms before, during, and after birth. And absolutely not 1 cent to Planned Parenthood. And then we have to also take a look and say, make sure that women have equal access to contraception. And then as a country, look to have a standard where after 15 weeks, we have common sense restrictions, because it's not normal for a nation to allow elective late-term abortions. I think that's cruel. I think most people wrap their head around that and say that's nuts, except for Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown is for federal funding for abortion. He thinks abortion should be allowed right at the moment of birth, and he even voted against a bill called the Infant Born Alive Protection Act. If you don't know what that is, in a botched abortion, the baby's there, is not allowed to be given life-saving care. The baby has to die, gasp for its last breath in a cold metal tube. So you ask me, who's the extremist on abortion? He is.
You're extreme for life.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Mr. Moreno, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, LaRose came down for an election integrity at our GOP headquarters in Green County. And I handed him the book Fallout by John Solomon. It has all of the Russian collusion profiting by the Clintons, the Bidens, and Obama. And I said, if all of us aren't shaking this at Trump rallies, they're going to beat us to death with Russian collusion forever. This is where the real collusion happened, selling out our weapon systems at the base, selling out uranium, uranium-1, all that stuff. And here they are bashing us over the head. Would you do me a favor? If you can, in a couple areas, will you help wave that book and show it to the public in a way that everyone can see it? Because if everyone at Trump rallies and your rallies had that book, the Democrats would never claim Russian collusion again. They would be running for the hills.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is we have to recognize that the left controls a lot of our institutions.
Yes.
They control big media, they control big tech, they control most of our government, except for, thank God, the House of Representatives. They don't control the Supreme Court, they don't control we the people. And this is why it's urgent for us over this election to make certain that we, with the right person in the Senate, make certain that we turn out. It's also messaging. If we don't show up, if we don't show up on March 19th and have an overwhelming victory for President Trump, you know what the media is going to say? Enthusiasm for Trump is low. This is not the kind of wave we're going to see. They'll create whatever narrative they want to create. We have to do what they did in places like Michigan, where President Trump got more votes than all the other candidates combined. It was a record turnout. In South Carolina, where Nikki Haley got schooled. Right? Right? That's what we have. Those are the things that we have to do. The one thing they can't take away from us is our ability to vote. And they also can't take, the other thing that makes this country unique is if you're a billionaire or you're as poor as can be, you still get one vote.
Yeah.
That's what equalizes this country. You have to make sure we do. I want to take one or two more questions. Yes.
I have first a statement and then followed by a question for Congressman
Oh,
Davidson.
perfect.
Number one, you guys, he said a buzzword, Supreme Court. Rumor has it, 2 Supreme Court justices may step down in the next 2 years. If we don't have the Senate, and even if Trump is president, we're screwed. So we need to get the Senate so that we know we have 2 more conservative judges coming in. Otherwise, that court is going to flip, and that's not going to be good.
Yeah.
So when you're voting for senator, remember, this man has a lot of control when he gets elected. He's going to be out there trying to get the best justice for us if 2 of them do step down. Hopefully that's okay. You said power of the purse. One thing we get here at the office, and I get when I'm outside this office, is the scare tactic that the Democrats are so good at doing. The government's going to shut down, and my 80-year-old grandmother's going to be without money, and they're going to throw her out of her house. And I told her Social Security was not all end all, but she didn't listen. And that's what we get, and we get flooded with that because they're so good at that.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we combat that with the opposite? To come back and say, no,
Yeah,
that's
so-
not what we're doing.
Yeah, so that's something that we anticipated, and when, go back to the start of this Congress, it was a contested who's going to be the speaker. Ultimately, McCarthy locked in the votes and became the speaker, and then Joe Biden said we have to raise the debt ceiling. No conditions. We're just raising it, and Kevin McCarthy said, no, we're not. We're gonna have some terms and conditions. So they drug it out all the way till they were about at the end of the runway, and we passed what was known as the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Well, that's a rare time that I actually voted for a debt ceiling increase. Historically, I had been saying, well, look, I'll vote for a debt ceiling increase because only when you tell me how you have a plan to balance the budget, because that's the only way you're actually going to repay it. If I make a loan, I want to know, are you going to pay me back? Unless you have a plan, I'm not voting for it. There, we voted for something that doesn't actually balance, but it was historic. It actually cut spending by 1%. So if at the end of the day we could have worked together as Republicans to hold the line on that number, we could have had more leverage on policy riders, terms and conditions, right? Unfortunately, we didn't. We broke ranks right after that, and the whole thing's been a train wreck ever since. But the part that actually could still give us leverage was also negotiated into that deal, which is known as the Massey CR. Thomas Massey down in northern Kentucky came up with this idea. What if we just threatened to do a 99% CR? Well, for a lot of the country, and frankly a significant number of my colleagues are like, 1% cut, that doesn't do anything, it doesn't balance the budget. It's pretty uninspiring, right? It seems very achievable, right? But I'll tell you how bad Washington, D.C. is scared of that 1% cut. They stopped Jim Jordan from being speaker because they knew he would implement it, right? It was the appropriators, the Appropriations Committee, that at the core, that's who blocked Jim Jordan from being our speaker, right? Then they selected Mike Johnson, and Mike Johnson didn't say decisively how he was going to do this, just everybody likes him. And at the end of the day, they've convinced him that we don't have the votes to call the play, that we'll fund the government at 99%. And why? Because a lot of Republicans, while they won't go out in public, they support a bigger government. Now, bigger government to do what they want, bigger government to do whatever, but a bigger government. Oh, we can't cut that, right? And it's also because of the earmarks. Billions of dollars of earmarks. And if they have the CR, they don't get the earmarks, right? And so that's why I say who you send there matters. Here's one thing, just a little bit of a longer story to illustrate it. In the 80s, people with AIDS were being denied housing, right? People didn't understand AIDS, they were afraid of it and everything else. So, the federal government set up a housing program where, of course, there's housing if you're poor, it's means tested and everything else. But there's one other way that you can get federal housing, which is you have AIDS. Now, you don't get free housing if you have cancer or Parkinson's or ALS or any number of other things, dementia. You get housing, though, if you have AIDS. And I thought, well, okay, now, with all the passage of time, people understand AIDS. They're not fearful of AIDS the same way they were. Certainly no one is being denied housing because of it, and it's treatable. So we could turn that program off. It spends $500 to $700 million a year. We could turn it off. Well, of course, all the Democrats said that was a bad idea, but unfortunately, so did 71 Republicans. Right? So if you look at all the amendments that we voted on this past year, if it really, truly, actual was a real cut, 20 to 70 Republicans said, oh, well, we can't cut that. I mean, we still pay for Obama phones. There's nothing we've turned off. Nothing we've turned. We're giving them to illegal immigrants right now. There's a whole app. And they give it to them. So at the end of the day, I really think that the most core thing we can do is insist on a Republican Party platform, kind of end the free range stuff and get everybody to agree. Here's what we agree on. And if all it says is we want a smaller government, I mean, think what would change. And I think President Trump is committed to a smaller government.
Yeah.
This time he's coming in knowing that draining the swamp means everybody that's eligible to be fired, they're going to be fired.
One last question, we'll wrap up. Yes.
My question is, because it dissuaded some of my family members for voting for you, was that you were anti-gun, and I come.
What?
They
Fake
said
news.
that you were, you didn't want the 100.
No, yeah. So here's what's interesting.
Underground
Politics is fascinating to me because I came from the car business. I used to joke that, we got a bad rap in the car business, and I went into politics. Because I couldn't tell you could lease a Mercedes for $100 a month with no money down. I'd go to jail. Here's the reality. The Second Amendment isn't there for hunting. The Second Amendment there is to protect us from government. That's the bottom line. I understand that more than anybody else because I came from a continent in which I watched Venezuela melt down. I watched that country go from having the same kind of gun laws as we have to a country where now it's a 20-year prison sentence to carry a private firearm. Whenever you take away guns, tyranny follows. We have to be definitive protectors of Second Amendment rights. And by the way, what have we seen over the last 4 years? Madison said in one of the Federalist Papers, an armed citizenry is the best defense against an ambitious government. He said that in 1789. Think about that. And was it true in the last 4 years? Right? When they were locking us up, telling us that, you remember the mom that was with her family at a football game on a Friday night by herself? They got dragged out of the stadium. Remember that outdoor stadium? I texted that to a senior person in Columbus, I'm not going to say who. You know what the response I got was? She was trespassing. Trespassing. We had nurses fired for not wearing masks, right? Nurses fired for not getting vaccinated. When you give government unlimited power and the citizens no ability to protect themselves, we can never even imagine something like that. But what's interesting is the person pushing that is Frank LaRose. How many of you have heard of a group called No Labels?
Yeah.
Warren, is No Labels a good group or a bad group?
They're not Republicans.
Not Republicans. But it's a Democrat front group, and what they do is they pretend to be bipartisan. They say, oh, we just believe in common sense ideas. This is a group that Nikki Haley thought they were too liberal because they wanted her to run on a unity ticket. Now they're thinking maybe Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney would be the president, vice president of the No Labels ticket. And by the way, they're in favor of every gun restriction you've ever heard of, fully funding Planned Parenthood, and amnesty. Today's Saturday, right? On Tuesday. So not 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 5 years ago, or even 2 weeks ago. On Tuesday, Frank LaRose was doing a fundraiser with No Labels. And they called him a longtime friend of the organization. Oh yeah. So in politics, have you ever seen the left? What does the left say about President Trump? Dictator. Who's a dictator, Trump or Biden?
Biden.
Right? Who provided a positive, optimistic view of the country was Trump. Look at Biden's speech. I don't know how you guys said it. I don't know that I could have done it, honestly, because when he's threatening he threatened the Supreme Court, right, in a chamber of Congress. And, the Republicans, how do you sit through that? And you had to, because you have to have decorum. But it was insane. This is a madman. And yet, they say he's the good guy and Trump is the dictator. It's the same kind of conversation. It's nuts, but, we'll get through this. And what I tell people all the time is, do you think Donald Trump Jr., Christine Ohm, Donald Trump would have endorsed me if I was weak in the Second Amendment? Do you think Warren Davidson would have endorsed me if I was weak in the Second Amendment? Right? Absolutely not. So that's just nonsense, but let me end with this, because this is, I can't stress this enough. March 19th really, really matters.
Amen.
You're gonna vote how many times?
11.
11 times, all right.
100 times.
And I wanna tell you what, or more, 11 or more, I wanna tell you what my pastor said to me the other day, a gentleman named Alistair Bay. I called him because I'm seeing that stuff, it gets my wife a lot, by the way. My wife does not like to see that. And so I called him just for inspiration. Tell me something that kind of gets me pumped up. And he paused. If you know Alistair, he's got this Scottish accent. He goes, Bernie, you're going to be dead someday. I'm like, oh, Jesus. Not what I was looking for, Dave. Right? And he goes, and because you're a believer, you're going to be in heaven. I said, okay, now we're getting better. And he said, when you get to heaven, and I want all of you to think about this the same way he told it to me. When we all get to heaven, you're going to get to meet some pretty incredible people. You're going to get to meet James Madison, John Adams, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. And you're going to, of course, walk up to him. Imagine Dave meets Abraham Lincoln up there, what that's going to be like. And he's going to tell you what he did when his country needed him. What he sacrificed, literally died. The signers of the Declaration of Independence, most of them got murdered because they signed that document. They're going to tell you why they did it, because this mattered so much to them. We're going to hear some incredible stories that are going to be shared, and you're going to be there. And then, this is the bad news, they're going to ask you what your story is. What did you do when your country needed you? And Alistair said to me, he goes, Bernie, you better have a pretty darn good story.
Love it.
And the point of that is, our country needs us today more than they've ever needed us. This isn't a battle about marginal tax rates. We'll lower those. Okay? Don't worry about that. This is an election about the future of this country and whether we can survive another 250 years or whether we're going to fall like every other civilization has at the 250-year mark, which is 2 years from now. Every modern civilization has ended after 250 years. Our calling is to make certain that we did everything. We left nothing on the field. We don't have an ability to play it over again. That when we look in the mirror on March 19th and on November 5th, that we look and say, I did everything I could. I made phone calls. I called my friends. I passed out literature. I stood on the corner with signs. I made certain that I dragged people to vote. I started a Patriots group. I came to meetings on a Saturday. I ran for public office. Because whatever it takes, there's nothing more honor than fighting like heck for your country. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you.